You are about to watch a man realize, in front of 300 people, that he has been wrong for 11 years, and decide to say so out loud. The cameras were still rolling when he did it. Not a production hold, not a break, not a planned moment between segments where the warm-up comedian comes out and the audience relaxes, and the producers confer through headsets about what needs resetting. The cameras were live. The families were at their podiums. The previous question had just been resolved, and Steve Harvey was mid-transition, moving from one moment to the next, the way he has moved through 3,000 episodes, with the specific, practiced fluency of someone who knows exactly where he is going. And then he stopped. He turned away from both podiums. He turned away from the audience. He stood alone in the center of the stage, facing no one, for 3 seconds that a production assistant in the control room later said, felt like watching a man decide something. Then he turned back. He put the microphone to his mouth. He said clearly to the room, "Hold on, I need to do something first." The Abernathy family had come from Tupelo, Mississippi, 5 of them. The mother, Ruth Ann, 64, who had taught kindergarten for 38 years and had the quality that long-term kindergarten teachers develop, which is an absolute imperviousness to chaos combined with an absolute faith in the eventual coherence of things. Her husband Leonard, 67, retired electrician, a man who communicated primarily through a low, confirmatory hum that everyone in his family had learned to decode with precision over 4 decades. Their daughter April, 36, who worked in hospital administration and had applied for the show on behalf of her parents because, as she later explained, her parents had never done anything purely for fun in their lives, and she intended to fix that. April's husband, Devon, 39, and Ruth Ann's brother Clifford, 61, who had driven 7 hours from Memphis and arrived with a cooler of snacks and an attitude of serene competitive confidence that had not yet been tested by actual gameplay. The other family was the Petroviches from Louisville. They were a good match, similar energy, similar warmth, genuinely well matched in speed and instinct. The game had been close through 2 rounds. The studio had the particular buzzing quality of a taping that is going well, where the audience can feel the thing working, where the laughter is real and the tension is real, and the host is in the full possession of his gifts. Steve had been in the full possession of his gifts, and then he stopped. He had seen something, later, he would not fully explain what. Not a single thing, but a gathering of things, the way sometimes a moment assembles itself out of its components faster than conscious thought. He had been watching Ruth Ann Abernathy. She had just gotten a question right, a good answer. The board had lit up, and the audience had cheered, and her family had celebrated. And Ruth Ann had smiled. Not the smile of a woman delighted by the win, but the smile of a woman who was more comfortable giving than receiving, who had spent 38 years building other people's confidence and was genuinely uncertain what to do with applause directed at her. He had seen that smile before. Not on this stage, he had seen it on his mother. Eloise Harvey had raised 3 children in Glenville, a neighborhood in Cleveland, on a combination of cleaning work and the specific economics of a household in which very little was wasted, and every dollar was accounted for twice. She had been, by every external measure, a woman of profound competence. Organized, reliable, present, the person her children came to, and her neighbors called, and her church depended on. She had been widowed when Steve was young, and had not once, in his memory, suggested to her children that the widowing had cost her anything she intended to show them. He had believed her. For years he had believed her the way children believe the versions of their parents that parents offer them, because the alternative, the version where your parent is also afraid, also uncertain, also carrying something heavy behind the smile, is too destabilizing to hold when you are young, and the parent is what you are standing on. He had understood the truth later, much later. In a conversation with his mother when she was older and he was older, and the professional distance between who he had been and who he had become had given him enough stability to hear things he couldn't have heard before. She had told him, in the way she told things, indirectly, through the side door, the way people tell things when direct telling has never been their language, that the years of managing alone had been the hardest thing she had done, and that the hardest part of the hardest thing was that nobody had thought to ask. Nobody had thought to ask. He had carried this for years. The specific weight of understanding that your parent had needed something from you, that you had been too young or too oblivious or too busy building your own life to think to give. There is no fixing this, there is only the knowledge, and what you do with it in the time that remains, and the way it changes how you look at a woman on a game show stage who smiles with her whole face but keeps something back, because keeping something back has been the practice of her entire adult life. He had never talked about this on camera, not in 17 years, not until this Thursday. He held the microphone. He looked at Ruth Ann. "Ms. Ruth Ann," he said, "can I ask you something personal?" She looked at him with the calm attention of a kindergarten teacher who has heard every variety of unexpected question, and learned that the correct response to all of them is to stay very still and listen. "Of course," she said. "How long have you been taking care of everybody else?" The studio fell completely silent. Ruth Ann blinked once. She looked at Leonard. Leonard produced his low, confirmatory hum, which in this context the family understood to mean, "Go ahead, say the true thing." 38 years of teaching, she said. "Before that I raised my brothers." She glanced at Clifford. "No offense." Clifford said, "None taken, Ruthie. I was a project." There was a small, real laugh from the audience. Then quiet again. "And who takes care of you?" Steve said. Ruth Ann's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Then she said, with the particular honesty of someone who has been asked the question they have been waiting a long time to be asked, and has no prepared answer because they never expected the question to actually arrive. I mean, Leonard does his best, and April—" She stopped. She looked at her hands. "I'm fine." Steve Harvey looked at her for a long moment. "My mother used to say that," he said, "her whole life. I'm fine." I believed her every time. The studio fell completely silent for the second time. "I'm going to tell you something I have never said on this stage," Steve continued. He was not performing now. His voice had dropped into something lower and more specific. The voice of a man in a conversation, not a host managing a moment. "I missed it. With her. I was so busy watching her hold everything together that I never thought to ask what it cost her." He stopped. "She told me later, and I couldn't fix it. You can't fix later." He looked at Ruth Ann. "I'm asking you now, on behalf of every person in your life who should have asked sooner. How are you actually doing?" Ruth Ann stood very still. She stood in the way she had rehearsed composure for 64 years. And then something in the composure loosened. Not catastrophically, not in collapse, but the way a knot loosens when finally the right amount of steady pressure is applied. "I'm tired," she said. "I'm real tired. And I don't know how to stop." The studio fell completely silent for the third time. April, beside her, reached over and took her mother's hand without looking at her. The automatic reach of a daughter who has been waiting for her mother to say this out loud for longer than she has words for. Leonard's low hum was different this time. The family heard it. It meant something the family had not heard it mean before. But Steve wasn't done. He walked to Leonard. He stood in front of him and said, "You knew." Leonard looked at him. 41 years, he said simply.
What did you do about it?
Leonard was quiet for a moment. Not enough, he said. I should have done more. It was 11 words. It landed in the room like something much heavier. Steve nodded slowly. He looked at both of them, Leonard and Ruth Ann, 67 and 64, 41 years of marriage assembled between them like a structure neither of them had ever stepped back to fully look at. You still can, Steve said. That's what I'm here to tell you. You still can. But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the Petrovich family across the stage. The Petroviches, a father and his 4 adult children from Louisville, people who had come to play a game and had been standing in the presence of something else entirely for the past 11 minutes. The youngest Petrovich daughter, who was 26 and whose name was Hannah, and who had been crying quietly since Steve mentioned his mother, stepped forward. She said, Can we give them the round? I don't want to play right now. I just want them to have it. Her father looked at her. He nodded. The Petrovich family forfeited the round. All of them said it together, which the producers later described as something that had never happened in a forfeit in the show's recorded history. The board lit. The Abernathy family number climbed. Clifford, who had driven 7 hours with a cooler of snacks and an attitude of serene competitive confidence, sat down on the stage floor and put his face in his hands. And nobody said a word about it because there was nothing to say. Steve turned to the camera. He turned to it with the directness he reserves for the moments when television stops being television. I want to talk to everyone watching at home, he said. There is someone in your life right now saying, I'm fine, who is not fine. You know who it is. You've always known. The reason you haven't asked is because you're afraid of what they'll say, or you're too busy, or you've told yourself they would say something if they needed to. He paused. They won't. The people who hold everything together do not ask for help. That is why they hold everything together. He looked at Ruth Ann. Ask them anyway. Ask 4 times if you have to. Don't let them get to later. A sound operator named Marcus, 7 years on the show, was doing his job with his full professional attention. His eyes were doing something separate from his job. The warm-up comedian in the wings had both arms folded tight across his chest, chin down, the posture of a man deciding whether he is about to cry in a professional setting. The audience was still. Not the anticipatory stillness of an audience waiting for what comes next. The stillness of people who have stopped waiting for anything because what is happening right now is enough. The clip released the morning after broadcast. Not 90 seconds, 4 minutes and 12 seconds, longer than platforms usually reward, and it was watched to completion at a rate that the distributor's analytics team described as statistically anomalous. 31 million views in the first 9 days. The comments section became something the platform's moderation team flagged as unusual. Almost no arguments, almost no crosstalk, almost entirely people writing 1-sentence confessions. I called my mom. I asked my dad for the first time in 40 years. She cried. We both cried. Thank you. The thread of 1-sentence confessions ran to 84,000 replies before anyone began cataloging them. 3 months later, April called to tell the producers that her parents had taken a vacation, their first vacation without children in 22 years. They had gone to the Gulf Coast. Ruth Ann had sat on a beach chair for 4 days and read novels and allowed Leonard to bring her things and had not organized or managed or taken care of anything except herself for 96 consecutive hours. She had told April afterward that she had not known she needed it. April had said, "Mom, I know." Ruth Ann had said, "You should have told me." April had said, "I did, 3 times." There was a pause. Then Ruth Ann had said, "You needed to ask 4." A year after the taping, Steve Harvey was asked about this episode in an interview. He said it was not a planned moment, and he could not have told you in advance what made him stop the cameras. He said, "Sometimes you see something in someone's face, and you know what it means, because you have seen it in someone you love and failed to respond, and you have been given a second chance to respond, and you do not let it pass." He said his mother was still alive. He said he called her on Tuesdays. He said, "I ask her 4 times now. The true thing usually comes on the 3rd. Today, Ruth Ann Abernathy still teaches. She retired from the classroom at 64 and then unretired at 65 because the school called and she couldn't say no. And the truth is, she didn't want to say no. Because teaching is not what she does. It is some fundamental part of what she is. But she teaches 3 days a week now instead of 5. She spends Thursdays doing exactly what she wants. She has not yet identified what that is with precision, and she has decided this is acceptable. The not knowing is part of it. She is learning to be comfortable in the space where there is no one to take care of, which is, perhaps, the hardest thing she has attempted in 64 years. Harder than the classroom, harder than the raising, harder than the long, competent decades of holding everything together. Leonard brings her tea on Thursday mornings. He has been doing this since the week they got home from the taping. He has not mentioned why he started. She has not asked. Some things do not need to be said to be understood. Every person you know who never complains, who is always available, who holds the room together and organizes the thing and shows up first and stays latest, that person is also a person, not a function, not a resource. A person with a weight and a weariness, and a threshold they have probably been approaching for longer than anyone has noticed. The ask costs almost nothing. The not asking costs everything, compounded over decades, paid in the currency of tiredness that nobody sees because the person has decided it is not something worth showing. Steve Harvey stopped 3,000 episodes in his tracks to say this out loud. It is not a complicated lesson. It is just very easy to forget. Share this with someone who has been saying they're fine for too long. And subscribe, because every week there is another story that almost didn't get told, and you should be here when it does.